Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Growing Week in Review. I'm Asbet Bedrosyan, and together with 𝐆𝐫𝐵 Manucharyan, we're going to discuss some of the developments of the past week. This week, we're going to discuss about the following major topics. Outcomes from the Nikol Pashinyan trip to Moscow. What is Azerbaijan's geopolitical situation after the war? Domestic politics in Baku. And Azerbaijan's losses from the second war in Artsakh.
And to talk about these issues, we have with us 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐴ZHIan, who is a political scientist based in Armenia, sharing his time between Yerevan and Stepanakert and specializing in Nagorno-Karabakh. Asbet Kochikyan, who is an associate professor of political science and international relations at the American University of Armenia, and Emil Sanamyan, a senior research fellow at USC's Institute of Armenian Studies, specializing in politics and the Caucasus with a special focus on Azerbaijan. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Hello, 𝐆𝐵𝐵.
Hello, 𝐆𝐵𝐵.
Hello.
All right, well, let's jump into our topics this week. The first one is outcomes from Nikol Pashinyan's trip to Moscow. So this past Monday, Prime Minister Pashinyan went to Moscow and signed some agreements with Aliyev, confirming Armenia's commitment to opening various trade and communication routes between the countries. The following day, Kommersant published a map of proposed railways connecting Turkey with Baku through Nakhichevan, all the way through to Russia, with a couple of extensions that pipe Yerevan into this railway as well. What are the corridors being discussed? Can someone maybe give a summary? Maybe Emil?
Hello. Well, about routes opening up. At this point, I think there have been a couple of routes that have already opened up, and they've opened up for the Russian military. So if we see a Russian resupply into Armenia now goes over Azerbaijani airspace. We've also seen reports that some of the Russian units in Karabakh, emergency personnel, is being resupplied via Azerbaijan, with the trucks coming through Azerbaijan to Karabakh. So this initial stage of routes opening up has to do with Russian military presence in Karabakh. It's an isolated area, so Russian priority is to open the airport, airstrip in Stepanakert and Ivanian, more directly bring in all kinds of goods there. To resupply their military easier rather than drive through the road that Armenians are used to driving through Goris. And I think that's kind of the priority for the Russians at this point, to reopen that airstrip. And in parallel, as additional compromise to Azerbaijan, they want to reopen the road via Meghri for Azerbaijan to have a direct access to Nakhichevan. I think that's the priority right now. All of the other issues are much more vague. As far as, there is not a great urgency in Armenia to ride through Azerbaijani roads it's just not, the security situation is just not there for Armenians to use those routes. But Russians definitely want an improved supply route into Karabakh, and Azerbaijanis would like to get the road via Meghri open for them.
Yeah, except we are hearing that the Armenian government claiming that this will be an economic benefit for Armenia to open this road. Edgar, I wanted to get your thoughts as well. Do you see any benefit for Armenia from these rail communications and road communications that are being worked on? Especially, I think within a month, there's going to be a commission that's going to come back and give specific guidance on how to move forward.
Thank you. Speaking frankly, and also speaking politically correctly, I see more challenges than benefits. Why? Because we had these reopenings as a result of the capitulation and defeat of Armenia, not as a result of mutually negotiable and mutually negotiated talks and discussions between, for example, Armenia and Azerbaijan, or Armenia, Azerbaijan and Russia. No, actually what we had was our defeat. Secondly, there is, as Emil mentioned very precisely, everything is very vague. So we only know that the so-called Meghri corridor, which will be running via Armenia's territory and connecting Kovsakan region, nowadays occupied by the Republic of Azerbaijan, with Nakhichevan. We will have this under Russian guardianship, under Russian patronage, but this will take briefly 5 years, with a possible prolongation plus 5. Okay, but what will be after 11 years? So the utmost question is security, and it's not a big secret for the Armenian population, for academic community, that the utmost problem Armenia is facing for 30 years is security. But you are right that the Armenian government is trying to communicate these steps, this perspective as a beneficial one. But it's propaganda. They can't but do that because there is no other there is no other option remaining, no other option left. So they should introduce some benefits after the defeat we had. But what I can state, without being an economic scientist, what I can state is that there is no economic analysis introduced by the government which will prove that we will benefit, at least economically, from this agreement. But to state that we will have security challenges, I can do that because the transportation and communication roads will be under Turkish and Azerbaijani control, and it's very visible from the map published in the Russian sources. For example, we could benefit if the road ran via Gazakh to Tavush, and yes, in that case, we would have much more beneficial communication road from Armenia to Russia.
Because it will be shorter?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, because right now the road extends all the way through the south of Azerbaijan and then goes up to Baku and then, so let me ask a question then to 𝐵𝐴Z𝐵 Khochikian as well. 𝐵𝐴Z𝐵, what are your thoughts about this? Have you seen the Kommersant map? Because when I looked at the map, all the cities were marked on it, and it seemed to me that those were stops on the railway, except there were no stops marked in the Armenian in the Sunik section. I wonder whether I'm reading the map wrong or if there's any additional sort of information you can provide.
Yeah, actually, I did look at the map. It's quite interesting what you mentioned at the end, Hovik. It's probably, as of now, there might not be a stop planned, and also considering that still from their perspective, from the Azerbaijani perspective, they're going to be passing through quote-unquote enemy territory. So having a stop there might not be beneficial for them because the chances of any attack or any kind of a harm or casualty or any kind of a harm would be higher. Now, that being said, again, this is something to think of later on. It's more speculation. Well, most of the things that we do as political scientists is speculation. But two things I think would be interesting within this context of the map, and that is, first of all, how Georgia is also being bypassed. For me, other than the initial sort of observation of the map, of the transportation map, it's quite interesting how if all of these are realized, then Georgia would be more and more isolated and sidelined in the region, be that Azerbaijan, Turkey sort of connection, or also being used by Russia as a corridor connecting route or a transit route to Armenia. So within this context, it was yesterday, I believe, when President of Azerbaijan, Aliyev, actually, he also put the foundations for a new airport in Füzuli, and after visiting Shushi. So all of this seems that it's a full steam ahead with all the plans of establishing communication network in the region.
Can I add a couple of things on the rail infrastructure condition? Prior to this war, the plan that Azerbaijanis had was to build a rail link between Kars and Nakhchivan. I'm not sure if there is a link already existing between Kars and Igdir, but it's still a substantial construction there between Nakhchivan and Turkey. That's number one. Number two, between Mehri and Horadiz, the rail line is non-existent, so it would have to be rebuilt. There was an interview with director of Armenian transportation company Apaven on CivilNet the other day, where he talked about the fact that because the Khudaferin reservoir was built in this number of years by Iran, The area where this rail line is shown on the map of Kommersant, is not there anymore. It's been flooded by the reservoir. So it would have to kind of go around, bypass. I mean, it's basically a new road would have to be constructed between Turkey and Nakhchivan, and also between Mehri, and I'm not sure about Ordubad and Mehri, most likely between Ordubad and Horadiz. So it's going to be a kind of a construction project that's going to take a while. I'm thinking years. And another thing is that, yes, in terms of Georgia, this might create kind of a new incentive for Georgia to rethink its policy on Abkhazia Railroad, because as far as I understand, Georgia-Abkhazia Railroad is actually intact. So the obstacle there is political decision by Georgia not to open the railroad, because Azerbaijan was actually pressuring them not to open the railroad, as well as their own, obviously, national, grievances with regard to Abkhazia. But now that this situation is happening, they might rethink that, and that might have a positive impact in that sense, that Armenia will have that railroad reopened between itself through Georgia and Abkhazia into Russia.
As far as all these railways are concerned, isn't it more beneficial for Armenia some kind of a railway that connects the northern part of the country through northern Azerbaijan to Russia?
Yeah, I mean, basically, what most benefit from the railroad opening in Armenia is the mining industry. You have mines all over Armenia, but the main mines are actually in the south. So you could think of a scenario where Armenia could use, for example, the Nakhchivan line by bringing, the copper and molybdenum from Kajaran and adjacent areas, and feed that into that railroad and take it out via Yerevan towards, Russia or Europe. Those probably most likely again Georgian ports. And that of benefit, that Nakhchivan stretch reopening for Armenia, and possibly some other heavy things that Armenia doesn't make very many heavy things other than raw metals and all those things, copper and things like that. So you can see of those benefits. What you have to keep in mind is that obviously this is a political carrot that Azerbaijan is sort of developing with Armenia, and considering the unresolved or unfinished business that they have, they still have at least 70,000 Armenians to cleanse out of Karabakh. So they will continue to connect any kind of benefit to Armenia with Armenia continue to sign off on the ethnic cleansing in Karabakh. So if they manage to connect that, yes, I think that could be a successful effort on their part.
Thank you.
And don't forget also the connection with Iran. Actually, it would make it easier for the transportation of goods from Iran to Armenia, which currently is only via roads and lorry trucks rather than a railway, which can actually increase the volume.
Again, I'm not sure what exactly would be transported from Iran into Armenia. Lorry traffic is fine for things like detergents and other household items or whatever that they move around. It's this heavy machinery and really heavy raw materials that you need the railroad for. In this case, because the volumes are very small for Armenia, whatever however you look at it.
Armenia for a long time had this north-south corridor construction going on, and I believe it's mostly constructed. And I believe we also had plans to open a rail link from Mehri, if I'm not mistaken. So what's going to happen to that communication route? Edgar, maybe you can talk about this.
Before answering this question, I want to re-stress that, for example, the last question by Aspet, that the railroad linking northern Armenia with Russia would be more beneficial. It's a legitimate question, but I want to re-stress that nobody asked us. It was not a sovereign agenda for Armenia. We had to enter this game. That's why nobody asked what would be beneficial exactly for us. That's why we didn't have that chance to promote our own national agenda. Coming to your question, yes, the south-north road had a general idea to I think make the transportation more comfortable, because indeed it's not a new road. When it was being built and constructed, it's not a new one. It's just a renovation of the older existing one. That's why I'm stressing the factor of being comfortable. But I think that the traffic is gonna reduce because Iranian goods are also, I think, going to be transported via this Nakhichevan railroad, and it will be a very non-beneficial and mental for especially Sunni province, but not only for Sunni, but also for Tavush and Lori, because it was very precisely mentioned during our conversation that Georgia is also going to be circumvented from these regional transportation hubs. And first and foremost, it's about the Armenian-Georgian transportation that is going to be reduced very much. So not only Armenia in general, but also Lori, Tavush, especially Tavush and Sunni provinces are gonna economically suffer from these initiatives, especially the tourist branch of the economy, tourism branch of economy, and other interconnected fields, services, etc.
So since the war ended 2 months ago, Azerbaijan has been talking tough and playing the role of a regional winner, flexing its political and military muscles with open and veiled threats at Armenia. Of course, this heavenly honeymoon will expire, hopefully soon. And much like Armenia, Azerbaijan is also, I believe, the subject of proxy power games of major world and regional powers. And certainly there is a price to pay for all the help that Turkey lent to Azerbaijan. So what are exactly Turkey's and Russia's expectations from Azerbaijan? Emil?
Well, what are the expectations? I don't know. I can speculate that Turkey would want to have a permanent military presence in Azerbaijan, and that's what's happening. They have a military presence, and they're expanding their military presence. How Russia will respond to this military presence, again, there are questions about that. Now they also have quasi-military presence in Azerbaijan. So, we can think of a situation where, overall, if you will look overall at this picture, we can see that one of the major motives for Turkey in Azerbaijan has had to do with Russian presence in Syria. So Russian presence in Syria has made a bunch of issues more difficult for Turkey. First, they had the objective of removing the Assad regime. They weren't able to do that. They wanted to completely destroy the quasi-Kurdistan state in Syria. They weren't able to do that, both because of Russian involvement and the American involvement there. So they have a problem with Syria, and Syria is a priority direction for sort of Turkish foreign policy. It's closer to even more of a priority direction, which is the Mediterranean. So that's where their priorities lie. Now that they're developing this military presence in Azerbaijan, we can speculate that down the road there might be a great bargain between Russia and Turkey, where Russia gets back Azerbaijan and Turkey gets Syria. We can think of something along those lines. Because again, from geographic perspective, historical perspective, Syria is much more of an important direction for Turkey, which is also, there's talk about, confronting Israel more directly and all that. So that's much more of a direct route for those priorities than Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, yes, there is a sort of a Turkic solidarity, etc. But I think it's a secondary issue for Turkey in the long-term perspective. So we can expect Azerbaijan sort of being traded back to Russia should Russia be amiable to that kind of trade-off.
And you said there is a quasi-presence in Azerbaijan. So you mean the taking part in these monitoring stations where Turkey will have...
and also the presence in Karabakh. Karabakh's de facto status right now, from Russia's perspective, is as an Azerbaijani territory, not as an Armenian territory. And that's how Armenia is also treating it. So if you have Russia and Armenia look at Karabakh as a place that basically Azerbaijan is in charge of, that's what it is.
One thing I want to add on what Emil said is that Çavuşoğlu just a couple of days ago, he actually was when asked, I think he was interviewed, and it was in the Sabah newspaper. He was asked what were his thoughts about Russian presence in Azerbaijan, in Nagorno-Karabakh. Russian troops where they were exceeding the number that they were planned as peacekeepers and so on. His response was basically a bit dismissive, saying that, oh well, that's Azerbaijan's territory. If Azerbaijan doesn't have an issue with it, neither do we. So basically deflecting it to a large extent, and also in my opinion, representing or presenting an image that there might be some kind of a tit for tat going on between Turkey and Russia.
Edgar, would like to hear your opinion as well.
Yes, generally I agree that Azerbaijan is a new battlefield for Turkish-Russian old rivalry. But I'm a little bit pessimistic on the perspective that Russia will be able to detach Azerbaijan from Turkey. We should take into account that for very long time inside Azerbaijan, İlham Aliyev has tried to minimize the capacity of the old elite, being strongly and organically connected with Russia, and this war manifested also that policy. We have semi-official sources and evidence that military operations were being conducted directly under the Turkish General Staff, and Azerbaijan's Minister of Defense and also Head of General Staff were just icons for being photographed during protocol meetings. And now Turkish presence and influence in Azerbaijan is very high. That's the reason that İlham Aliyev is trying to use the Russian card and revitalize its amicable and friendly relations with Russia, because he feels the threat. He had to do that to accept that Turkish influence in order to have this victory. But now he faces that challenge because his rating increased very much, not only in Azerbaijan but also in the so-called Turkic world. But in the Turkic world, there can be only one leader from Erdogan's perspective. That's why I witness this already launched Azerbaijani and Turkish rivalry, and İlham Aliyev tries to use, as I mentioned, the Russian card in order to keep the sovereignty inside both his own country and in the international and regional affairs within the level it was before the war. But as I mentioned, I am not very much optimistic that he and Russia are gonna to succeed, because Turkey has deeply infiltrated inside this country, especially via soft power tools, and this railway and other communications that are gonna take place will restress and reinforce this dependence that Azerbaijan has from Turkey.
Emil, what is Turkey's specific role as part of the peace agreement right now in terms of military presence? There's this talk about this monitoring station where half of it is going to be Russian and half of it is going to be Turkish troops. What is going to be their role exactly? And is it just symbolic right now, or are they going to have more specific, military duties?
We could think of it kind of like the observation positions that Turkey has in Syria. where basically the role is to sort of protect the positions of their allies in Idlib area and sort of serve as a trigger point for in case Russians start to build up in Karabakh, or in a highly hypothetical scenario, Armenia becomes a country again and starts to build its own military, etc. So they're going to be watching that to make sure that their allies are protected. That's the point of that. But there is also the additional infrastructure. I mean, there are much larger infrastructure that I believe is still there. The Air Force infrastructure is still there that they want to make permanent. Different air bases in Azerbaijan, and that's where I don't think it's been settled yet. If we look at this whole issue with Turkish role in commanding Azerbaijani forces during the war, yes, the top Azerbaijani general was dismissed during the war. Najmuddin Sadykhov, one of the corps commanders, Rovshan Akberov, was also dismissed. But they were dismissed in a way, in a sort of concealed way, and to this day this issue remains concealed. Basically, the biography of the person who was in charge of the Azerbaijani military for the past 27 years was just removed from the website. He wasn't at the military parade, and his nephew was fired from a sort of internal security position in defense. But that was it. They didn't publicly dismiss him, and he is not just a military figure. He is now an in-law of Araz Agalarov, buddy of Donald Trump, and one of the most influential people in Russia. So even though he was dismissed de facto, that was not made public. He was not publicly humiliated, and he might be returned at some point for whatever reason. That's still not been settled. So yes, we have a significant Turkish military presence in Azerbaijan, but it's not been codified. Azerbaijan continues to claim that they don't have a Turkish military permanent presence, and it's just sort of exercises and whatnot. So that issue remains in the air.
They still don't have that presence, but I guess Turkey will have that presence, at least in Ganja, because I think that it was their utmost purpose, goal, and objective why Turkey participated de facto in this war.
Edgar, we haven't heard anything about the Syrian mercenaries. Are they all gone?
Yes, no evidence, no news. The question is being already, it's already forgotten, because the only subject and the only state that is naturally interested to promote this topic, both in international newsfeed and in the diplomatic negotiations, is Armenia. But Armenia nowadays doesn't have the state capacity to do that. That's why maybe it's negotiated clandestinely between Russia and Turkey, or maybe also Russia, Turkey, and Azerbaijan, but we are already out of this topic.
The thing about the Syrian mercenaries is that even while they were being deployed, there was pretty much zero reaction from Armenia to it. Russia was the one raising the issue through its foreign intelligence
and Iran
statements, etc. Yeah, Iran as well. So Armenia, was as blind before the war as blind now. So, blind and mute.
Can we talk about domestic politics in Baku a little bit? So the Aliyev clan, as we know, has ruled Azerbaijan like a family business for much of the last half century, quashed democracy and oppressed its domestic opposition with the excuse that the country was at war, and for national security mainly. What is the state of the political opposition in Baku now that that question is no longer, has the same truth to it? Is Aliyev secure now, or what is the foreseeable future? Emil.
I think it all hinges on his state of health. I don't know what it is right now. It seems fine. He's driving a car, but one of the reasons he's driving the car is that he doesn't want to be in a car with anybody other than his family members. So he's still socially distancing and whatnot.
Wait, is he germaphobe, or because of COVID, or why?
Speculation is that he's had cancer and he's had chemotherapy or whatever other treatments he had, and his immunity he's basically in the risk group for COVID and other diseases. But I don't know what it is right now. I don't know. Maybe it's in recession. Maybe it's nobody knows. I don't think anybody other than his very tight knit circle of Israeli doctors. That's the only question. Beyond that, at this point, I think if there was a buildup in kind of anger towards him prior to the war, I think it's been substantially reduced after the war. It's clear that he managed to control the message on the war in a way that is rarely seen. Basically, he announced every single capture of every single position that Azerbaijani army did. So as if he was doing it, not Azerbaijanis or the Turks or the Syrian mercenaries. And he is sort of made it his victory rather than anybody else's. I don't know at what point there is going to be a regrouping and what is going to be a trigger for political regrouping in Azerbaijan. Most likely it will be his health and some kind of transition of power from him to his wife or whatever. But at this point, it seems like he's stable.
Asbet Kochikian, what would it take for more democratic forces to spring up in Azerbaijan?
A lot. The short answer is a lot. But one thing you need to keep in mind as well, and a lot of analysts did talk about this as the war was going on, and even at the beginning of the war, that a victory for Azerbaijan would have meant the consolidation of the Aliyev regime. Now, based on what Emil was talking about, what that regime would look like internally is another issue. Is it going to be headed by Aliyev or someone else? But I do not see the rise of a democratic, or at least opening up some kind of probably raising the ceiling for freedoms, including freedom of speech and gathering and so on. If anything, this war was a major blow to any kind of a democratic activism or a democratic sort of initiatives in Azerbaijan and the success of the authoritarian regime, that is.
And Edgar, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with previous speaker that there is very little chance and opportunity for the Azerbaijani democracy to take effect, because in order to have Azerbaijani democracy nowadays, we should have had the seed of the latter in the past. But we haven't. Yes, also I agree that Ilham Aliyev tried to capitalize this victory for his own benefit, making from it a sort of personal victory. He does it also nowadays. For example, the very ridiculous footage showing him, portraying him with throwing down that road stencil written in Armenia in Artsakh and announcing that no road stencils can now exist, no Armenian road stencils can exist on the Azerbaijani soil. It's a very primitive propaganda, but it works. But the very question is whether it will work also in the visible future or not, because the socio-economical problems of Azerbaijan are not gone. The pandemic is not gone also. And I think the very bothering question for Aliyev, he announced that the issue is over. They don't have Nagorno-Karabakh issue now. I understand why he did so, because after all this, he could not stand up and announce that they still have some unresolved questions, because naturally questions would arise. Why? Because they had so much suffering, so much victims, and now they still have some problems with Armenians. Why? That's why he announced that everything is gone. We'll resolve the question. But if they resolve the question, okay, then which is the agenda, national agenda, around which Aliyev is going to mobilize his population? I don't have answer. And I strongly doubt that whether he has the answer or not. And coming also to the last point related with his illness, yes, I also do have semi-official and unfortunately not verifiable evidence and sources that, yes, he has cancer. So he also has to find ways to transfer his power, maybe to his wife, because no other candidate is visible. So we have to monitor and further analyze what's going on there.
One thing that I think all the guests sort of went quickly over, but maybe a potential roadmap for Aliyev, are the losses on the Azerbaijani side. So far, we've heard a lot about the military losses on the Armenian side, both human and equipment-wise, and the books aren't closed yet, but very little about Azerbaijan. And, there's signs that actually Azerbaijan's losses may be significant. They officially, I think, claimed some 2,000 or so losses, but could this number actually be much higher? And could this be potentially a cause for unrest in the future in Azerbaijan?
I don't think so, if you want to know my view. First of all, they've published names of almost 2,900 people who died, military people who died. So far, I have no evidence that the number is higher than that. Probably is somewhat higher. Could be between, Mikhail, I think, speculated it could be as high as 5,000. If it's between 3,000 and 5,000, probably it's within range of Armenian military casualties. And considering that most of the Armenian casualties were from aerial attacks or long-range attacks, it makes sense that Azerbaijani casualties would be somewhat less than Armenian or not more than Armenian. And, you add in about 500 Syrian mercenaries killed that the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported about. That's where the balance is. Obviously, if it's 5,000 for Armenia, it's much more of a heavy load of casualties than 5,000 for Azerbaijan. So I don't see that. And of course, considering the outcome of the war, I don't see that being a big issue in Azerbaijan.
Yes, I also agree. I also thoroughly agree with Emil, to be short, to put it short, that their losses, I think, is the first battle, Armenian-Azerbaijan battle, that their losses are less, unfortunately, than ours. It was due to the logic of the warfare, mainly, the UAF attacks, and I think that it cannot be a danger for Aliyev's power, because those war victims are dispersed throughout Azerbaijan, mainly within rural and small villages, dwellings. That's why no outbursts of public anger will take place, I think.
And do we have some quantitative analysis of the actual hardware that Azerbaijan lost? One of the stories that was circulating was that Azerbaijan depleted its military arsenal, and they had brought out T-55 tanks. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, they were much smaller than Armenia's, and actually there is speculation that they have captured more equipment from Armenian army than they lost in the war. I don't know if it's true, but probably not true. But bottom line is they started with a much larger arsenal, and their losses were smaller than Armenia's. So I mean, it's just insignificant as far as they were able to gain.
Speaking frankly, I have nothing to add up to what Emil said, because yes, that's right, that they also suffered heavy losses in terms of military technique, but nowadays, taking into account in which situation is Armenia in terms of army and army structure, it's not significant. Yes, Emil is right, because what they lost, they will revive, they will restore. And nowadays it doesn't affect their, especially military policy.
The one thing I would like to point out, if we got into the losses during the war is that it was clear that they were losing a lot of their combat capable forces, and they had a shortage of combat capable forces from the beginning. The main reason for Syrian mercenaries to be brought in. And if you look at the forces that actually took Shushi and were sort of standing outside of Shushi at the end of the war, they were police forces, the interior forces that kind of tells you that they've sort of went through all of the other forces that they have, and they brought in from all the other. They were able to do that because Armenia didn't attack anywhere else, so they were able to bring in all of their combat forces from Nakhchivan, from all the other corps, from the border guards, and eventually from the police as well. Of course, Armenia's forces were even more depleted. That's why there was no one there defending Shushi when they arrived to Shushi. And there was a couple of volunteer groups and actually some also police forces from Armenia and from Karabakh.
Was Armenia's forces depleted, or were they never engaged?
They were, of course, depleted. Yes, they were depleted in Karabakh because they were brought in piecemeal in a very unorganized way, and there was a lot of panic. Majority of Armenian losses were a result of panic and sort of nice retreat. And that's how it happens in every war. If you remember the war in Iraq, in Kuwait in 1991, and that huge column of Iraqi equipment that was destroyed, it was just disorder. That was the type of losses that Armenia suffered. Basically, either attacked as they were trying to arrive into Karabakh, or attacked as they were trying to flee from Karabakh. So that's kind of the picture there, unfortunately. But what was clear, had Armenia organized somewhat better in terms of mobilizing reserves and mobilizing just sufficient reserves to, just bring in a few Lopas into Shushi and let them pupazel in front of Shushi, they might have attacked, but they didn't even do that.
Thank you everyone for your contributions, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you, 𝐿𝐵𝐺. Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you too, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
And that concludes our program for this episode of 𝐞𝐈 Weekend Review. We hope it has helped your understanding of some of the issues from this previous week. We look forward to your feedback and suggestions for issues to cover in greater depth. Contact us on our website at 𝐞𝐈.org, that's GROONG, and on our Facebook page, ANN-𝐞𝐈, or in our Facebook group, 𝐞𝐈-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm 𝐊𝐵𝐺 Manucharyan, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you next week.